Hi, my name is Dayiana. Today I want to share with you on how to answer the simulation of void accounting question. The question is, record the following transactions in the void book for the month of January 2021 for object 27,000, void B27, program activity 283,344. It will be recorded at the first column at part 1. Next, the first transaction is on the 1st January 2021, where an allocation warrant WP01/21 amounted to 800,000 ringgit for object 27,000 from the Director General. It will affect at Part 1, Part 2 and Part 3 column. In Part 1, we will record at allocation as at the estimated year 2021 with the amount of 800,000 ringgit. In Part 2, we will record at the date, amount and the amount to date. And part 3, we will record at the column of 1 to 5 with the reference given. And column number 7, which is credit column as the budget has increased. And lastly, column 11. Second transaction is on the 2nd January 2021. Local order LO 12,000 to Syarikat IV for purchase of office stationery with expenditure code 27111 amounted to 4,000 ringgit. The expenditure code and voucher number will put at the column 4 and 5. The amount recorded is 4,000 ringgit at column number 8. As we have liabilities charged, we have to record at the outstanding liabilities 4,000 ringgit. So the balance to date is reduced to 796,000 ringgit as the liabilities charge will decrease the budget. Third transaction is on the 4th January 2021. Issued sub-allocation warrant number WPP 07/21 for 130,000 ringgit to Petaling Jaya branch. It is reduced allocation will affect in part 2 and part 3 only. So in part 2, we will record as negative value and part 3 at the debit column since this is not a liability. So we are just going to copy down the previous figure in outstanding liability. So the balance to date is reduced to 666,000 ringgit because the allocation has been reduced by 130,000 ringgit. The fourth transaction is on 6th January 2021. Local order LO 13,000 to Rosendran Berhad for purchase of 2 units of fax machine with expenditure code 27112 amounted to 30,000 ringgit. The expenditure code and voucher number will put on the column number 4 and 5. The amount recorded is 30,000 ringgit at column number 8. But now, the outstanding liabilities has increased to 34,000 ringgit. How did I get this figure? It is 4,000 ringgit from the previous liabilities transaction plus 30,000 ringgit. So, the balance to date is reduced to 636,000 ringgit as the liabilities charge will decrease the budget. The fifth transaction is on the 7th January 2021. Prepared a payment voucher BP 11/18 being full payment to Syarikat IV for office stationeries with expenditure code 27212 amounted to 4,000 ringgit. This is an expenditure whereby the amount paid is less than the amount of liability, therefore, it will only affect in part 3. So we will record the basic columns since the payment will decrease the budget. So we are going to record the amount of 4,000 ringgit on the debit column and the amount in 8 column will be recorded in bracket. So, to indicate that it has been paid. And then the outstanding liability is now will be reduced and the net expenditure column also will be affected. And if you notice that the balance to date is not affected, it is because in the first step, we record the full amount of the liabilities, which means we have already reduced the budget for the liabilities. So if we reduce the balance to date again, there will be double reduction to the budget for the same transaction. That's why we will not reduce the balance to date when the liability was paid. The sixth transaction is on the 9th January 2021. Indent IDN 27/07 to Sol 8 Enterprise for the supply of set computer tables and chairs with expenditure code 27113 for 14,500 ringgit. So indent is like a purchase order by the government for the goods from foreign supplier, and therefore this is a liability. What type of liability? This is a direct liability, and liability will affect part 3, and the column that will be affected is the basic column, and record the amount under liabilities charge, increase the outstanding liability by 14,500 ringgit, and then copy down the expenditure amount, and finally the balance to date is decreased to 621,500 ringgit. The seventh transaction is on the 10th January 2021. Received an additional allocation number WP05/21 amounted to 45,000 ringgit from the Director General. It will affect at Part 1, Part 2 and Part 3 column. In Part 1, we will record at additional allocation for the year with the amount of 45,000 ringgit. In Part 2, we will record at the date, amount and the amount to date. And Part 3, we will record at the column of 1 to 5 with the reference given, and column number 7, which is credit column, as the budget has increased. Since this is not a liability, so we are just going to copy down the figure, the previous figure in outstanding liability, and increase the balance to date amount by 666,500 ringgit. The 8th transaction is on the 12th January 2021. Payment voucher BP12/18 to Rosnian Berhad to pay advance payment of 30% with expenditure code 27122. This means that this is an expenditure whereby the amount paid is less than the amount of liability. Therefore, it will only affect in Part 3. So we will record the basic column since the payment will decrease the budget. So we are going to record the amount of 9,000 ringgit, which is 30% times with 30,000 ringgit under debit column, and the amount in 8 column will be recorded in bracket to indicate that it has been paid, and then the outstanding liability is now will be reduced, and the net expenditure column also will be affected, amounted 13,000 ringgit, which is 4,000 plus 9,000 ringgit, and the balance to date is not affected. The 9th transaction is on the 14th January 2021. An agreement has signed with Daisy Blooms Enterprise PT 199809 for 2 years office equipment contract with the expenditure code 27201 amounted to 374,000 ringgit to be started in April 2021. It will only affect at the Part 3 of the vote book. The amount of 140,250 ringgit will put at the column liabilities charge, where I get 250,000 is 374,000 divided by 2, and the amount will times with 9/12 since it started in April 2021. So the balance to date will reduce at 526,250 ringgit. But now the outstanding liabilities has increased to. Next, on the 15th January 2021, received transfer allocation from Object 25,000 number WPK05/21 amounted to 15,000 ringgit. Transfer allocation from Object will affect Part 2 and Part 3 of the vote book. In Part 2, the amount will be recorded as positive value, and the amount to date is increased by 15,000 ringgit, whereas in Part 3, the amount will be recorded in the credit column as it has increased the budget. Since this is not a liability, so we are just going to copy down the previous figure in the outstanding liability, and finally increase the balance to date amount by 15,000 ringgit. The 11th transaction is on the 16th January 2021. Solid Enterprise issued bill number SI 2800/02 amounted to 15,000 ringgit for supplies of set computer tables and chair. Prepare a payment voucher number BP13/18 to Solid Enterprise with expenditure code 27207 amounting to 15,000 ringgit, and a new indent number is IDN 19981 for additional costs. It will affect Part 3, and the column that will be affected is the basic column, and record the amount under liabilities charge. Increase the outstanding liability by 500 ringgit, where I get 500 is the additional cost because Solid Enterprise on 9th January 2021 is 14,500 ringgit. And then copy down the expenditure amount, and the balance to date is decreased to 540,750 ringgit. Since the payment will be decreased the budget, so we are going to record the amount of 15,000 ringgit under debit column, and the amount in 8 column will be recorded in bracket to indicate that it has been paid, and then the outstanding liability is now will be reduced, and the net expenditure column will be affected, and the balance to date is not affected. The 12th transaction is on 17th January 2021. Signed an agreement PT 199819 with Orchid Clean Sdn Bhd for a period of 2 years office cleaning service contract with expenditure code 27228 amounted to 150,000 ringgit to be started in July 2021. In effect, at the part 3 of the vote book, the amount of 37,500 ringgit will put at the column liabilities charge, where I get 37,500 ringgit is 150,000 divided by 2, and the amount will times with 6/12 since it started in July 2021. So the balance to date will reduce at 503,250,000 ringgit. But now the outstanding liabilities has increased to 198,750 ringgit, which is 161,250 ringgit from the previous liabilities transaction plus 37,500 ringgit. The 13th transaction is on the 18th January 2021. The Accounts Committee approved to carry forward the balances of outstanding liability for the year 2020 of 12,500 ringgit. It will affect Part 3 and record the number under liabilities charge, which is 12,500 ringgit, increase the outstanding liability, and then copy down the expenditure amount, and the balance to date is decreased to 490,750 ringgit. Next, on the 19th January 2021, contract PT 199809 with Daisy Bloom Enterprise amounted to 374,000 ringgit was cancelled. It has been recorded as 60,000 ringgit. This means that we need to adjust the entry that we did on 14th January 2021. So we need to reverse back the record by recording the amount issued, which is the amount of 60,000 ringgit in 8th column will be recorded in bracket to indicate that it has been cancelled. Then the outstanding liability is now be reduced to 151,250 ringgit, and the balance to date is increasing by 60,000 ringgit. On the 20th January 2021, received notice to reduce allocation from the Director General for 45,000 ringgit, reference number NPP 1/21. We will definitely record 45,000 ringgit as a negative value in Part 2, and in Part 3, we will record 40,000 ringgit at the debit column, and the balance to date is now 546,000 ringgit. So as we record the non-liability transaction, we must not to forget to copy down the outstanding liabilities and the net expenditure amount. On the 22nd January 2021, found that the cancellation of contract agreement PT 199809 with Daisy Bloom Enterprise for 374,000 ringgit was wrongly recorded as 60,000 ringgit. The entry must be corrected. We need to adjust the entry that we did on 19th January 2021. So the amount of 60,000 ringgit in 8 column will be recorded. Then the outstanding liability is now increased to 250,000 ringgit. And the balance to date is decreasing by 60,000 ringgit. Second transaction, we will make a correct entry by adjusting the entry using the correct amount issued, which is 140,250 ringgit. In 8 column will be recorded in bracket to indicate that it has been cancelled. Then the outstanding liability is now will be reduced to 71,000 ringgit, and the balance to date is increasing by 140,250 ringgit. On the 23rd January 2021, transfer of allocation to object 46,000, reference number WPP 08/21 amounted to 40,000 ringgit. It is reduced allocation will affect in Part 2 and Part 3 only. So in Part 2, we will record as negative value, and that will give us a total date equals to 645,000. In Part 3, at the debit column, since this is not a liability, so we are just going to copy down the previous figure in outstanding liability. So the balance to date is reduced to 546,000 ringgit because the allocation has been reduced by 40,000 ringgit. On the 26th January 2021, issued of payment voucher number BP14/18 with expenditure code 27237 of 3,500 ringgit for payment of telephone bill TM2001-735 to TM Berhad. We will record in part 3 at the debit column since this is not a liability, so we're just going to copy down the previous figure in outstanding liability. So the balance to date is reduced to 542,500 ringgit because the allocation has been reduced by 3,500 ringgit, and the net expenditure column also will be affected, which is 28,000 ringgit plus with 3,500 equals by 31,500 ringgit. The 19th transaction is on the 27th January 2021. Cancel contract agreement PT199819 with Orchid Clean Sdn Bhd amounted to 150,000 ringgit. We need to adjust the entry that we did on 17th January, so we need to reverse back the record by recording the amount issued, which is the amount of 37,500 ringgit in 8 column will be recorded in bracket to indicate that it has been cancelled. Then the outstanding liability is now will be reduced and the balance to date is increasing by 37,500 ringgit. The last transaction is on the 29th January 2021. Make a collection for personal phone charges with expenditure code 27237 amounting to 600 ringgit with reference number PP77088. This is a credit expenditure with no requirement for repayments, so we will record the amount under credit column and minus the amount from the net expenditure and finally add back to the balance to date because personal phone charges is not operating expenditure to the government. Thank you so much for your time and stay safe. Bye-bye.